Welcome to Symbolic Word. We're going to talk about Vav, the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Vav at first means a barrier or a wall, something that is blocking the path. It is a lock on a door, anything that prevents passage from one place to another. We could also say that it is the event horizon between two very distinct things, or two opposites, such as black and white. What is the difference? When does black become white and vice versa? Or when does good become evil? At what point does it cross over? Well, that point right in the middle, where there is a barrier between the two, that is the Vav. The Vav is the point where all possibilities in Kether are separated from the reality of Malkut, which is the physical universe. It is also considered to be the number of the beast. Now, when we talk about Vav as a barrier, we can think back to our discussion on Dalet and Gimel, where Vav sits right between these two different viewpoints of life, one of the rich man and one of the poor man. And there is a barrier between the two. It is very difficult for a Dalet to suddenly become a Gimel, or vice versa. But the first time that we're introduced to the idea of the Vav is in Genesis, when the waters were separated into two waters, and there was a firmament between them. And that firmament is a Vav. It is a barrier which keeps the two waters separated, the upper waters from the lower waters. Now Jesus went on to explain that no man had ascended into heaven except he that came down from heaven, implying that his life force came from the upper waters, and he was the only one on earth at the time who came from the upper waters, or the only one who ever came from the upper waters. And there is a principle behind that we are all from the lower waters. And the two waters, the one is usually looked at as being the source of angels, angelic beings, or higher order life. And the lower waters is where the animals and plants and human beings come from. And so one is the Dalet, let's say, of the waters. The Dalet waters is the lower waters, and the Gimel waters is the higher waters, the higher order of being. And so the angelic beings are the rich man in a kind of a symbolic sense, and human beings are the Dalet of the two. Now, when Jesus died, he actually spanned over that barrier. In Judaism, the barrier of Vav separates the heavens from the earth, the physical universe from the spiritual. And of course, when Jesus died, since his life force came from the upper waters, he formed a ladder reaching from the earth realm into the heavens, something that had not been opened before, that there hadn't been an open passageway between the two. And therefore his death was supposed to open up a way back, a way of return for us human beings to become clean again. Okay? And that is the same image of Jacob's ladder, which is found in Genesis, where he was at Bethel and he saw the angels ascending and descending on this ladder. Well, Jesus used that same language to describe himself and his death. When we think about the Aleph, who is the ox, he stands with one hand above the valve and the other hand below the valve. And that becomes very important because the Aleph, even though he's from the lower waters, he has access to the upper waters. He can see beyond the valve, or he has understanding beyond the valve. Now, when we think about the valve in everyday terms, we can talk about cosmologists who understand that there is a problem when we think about the infinitely large, how big the universe is, and when we think about the infinitely small, things on the scale of atoms and subatomic particles. They have a problem reconciling how the difference between these two and where the valve actually lies, or where the barrier lies between those things that are a part of the universe out there and the inner verse, or the inner space of atoms and molecules and things of that nature. So we always think of the universe as being outside of ourselves. It's out there somewhere, and it's expanding beyond us and infinitely beyond us. While the atom is found on the contracting side inside of us. It is that inner space. And so the valve lies between the two. Where does one stop and the other start? Where does the expanding part start? And where does the contracting part start? And when you get to that event horizon, that would be considered the valve, the boundary. We found that in physics, that motion of energy, that exchange of energy that is both expanding and contracting, is represented by the torus, this shape here. And also this shape here. This is a torus. And so that is the shape that we usually find galaxies, the spiral galaxies, are in the shape of a torus. The valve in Kabbalah is based on something else. The valve is represented in Kabbalah as the Ein Sof, which separates the supernal spheres of the Sephirots from the lower seven. So here are the upper Sephirots, the Kether, Binah, and Kokma, and it's separated by an abyss, the Ein Sof. And the only way through the abyss is through Das, which actually most of the time is not shown, but is shown on some trees of life. And it is like a gateway, the only path through. And again, we can think about the Christ and his death, and that's what he is supposed to be, that ladder that leads back to the spiritual world, or the higher orders of being. So death is that gateway that passes from our physical universe into the spiritual universe. But also there is another part down here, the Klipoth, which is the layer of shells. Here in Malkuth is the physical universe, but there's this universe of shells, this place where all the energy from above the Kabbalah comes through, and it has to occupy matter. And so the shells are these empty shells where the spirit and all the energies of the upper spheres come and dwell inside of those shells. There's a saying that the Kether of one world is the Malkuth of another. And so these are actually single points of manifestation. Kether and Malkuth are one and the same thing. And if you bend the tree over, you'll see that the abyss and the place of shells, this barrier here, also kind of correspond to one another. And so we have this image of what, didn't mean for that to be in there. We have this image of two barriers, but really the real barrier here is the Ein Sof. Okay? If you'd like to know more about Jewish and Christian symbology, You can join us on Facebook, where we talk about symbolism, prophecy, hidden meanings in the Bible, and Kabbalah.